Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, everyone.
Oh, very hot day today.
Well,
I don't agree anyway. It is. It's Sahara Desert, but
it's a nice cool breeze. We're sitting in
yeah,
the park and
pigeons are around us.
pigeons are around. And the crows. No parrots so far. Just us and the pigeons.
So we're starting a new chapter today. It's chapter
Yay!
10, Divisions of the Creation.
Oh, okay.
Canto 3, chapter 10, text 1.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. You can hear there's a lot of background noise because we're sitting right next to the road.
I know, but I needed the shade.
Okay.
Alright, text 1. Sri Vidura said, O great sage, please let me know how Brahma, the grandfather of the planetary inhabitants, created the bodies of the living entities from his own body and mind after the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay,
so what we've got from this is the conversation between Vidura and Maitreya is continuing. Vidura is now inquiring from Maitreya Muni after we've just heard this amazing pastime of the conversation between Lord Brahma and Lord Vishnu, and how Lord Brahma's mood was very humble and submissive, and he didn't want to fall down and have trouble and become proud when he did the creation, so he needed help and asked for empowerment. And the Lord was offering it to him and explaining, everything will be all right if you just follow my order. And now Vidura is saying, okay, that's great. So how did Lord Brahma create living entities, right? So
yeah.
Catch yourself. Okay.
Text 2. O greatly learned one, kindly eradicate all my doubts and let me know of all that I have inquired from you from the beginning to the end.
If you remember, there was a point at which there were a lot of questions asked. I'm sure we're nowhere near the end.
Purport. Vidura asked all relevant questions of Maitreya because he knew well that Maitreya was the right person to reply to all the points of his inquiries. One must be confident about the qualifications of his teacher. One should not approach a layman for replies to specific spiritual instructions.
Inquiries.
Such inquiries, when replied to with imaginative answers by the teacher, are a program for wasting time.
Oh, nice point. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's important to ask questions from the right source.
Yeah, so it's important to have questions, and it's important to ask them.
Yeah.
But we also, you're not going to call up your kind of beautician and ask her how to fix the plumbing in the sink or how to fix your car, and you're probably not going to call the mechanic around to do your hair. It's like you have to ask the right person. So if you have spiritual questions are meant for spiritual people, not pseudo-spiritual people either, but spiritually advanced people who can answer the questions properly. Nice. Text 3. Sutta Goswami said, okay, so now we've swapped over. So remember, Sutta Goswami is with the sages of Naimisharanya, and he's repeating what he heard from the conversation between Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, and he's speaking specifically to Shaunaka Rishi, and he's telling the story of Maitreya Muni and Vidura. There you go. You got to keep it all in line, Okay, so Sutta Goswami said, O son of Brigu. I guess that must be Shaunaka Rishi. O son of Brigu, the great sage Maitreya Muni, thus hearing from Vidura, felt very much enlivened. Interesting. Everything was in his heart, and thus he began to reply to the questions one after another. So it's like that. So we know if anyone has ever given a class or a talk, and it's always inspiring when people ask questions. It's always a little concerning when at the end of a class no one has any questions, and I often think, what does that mean? I explained everything very clearly, Or does it mean that people don't really think you can answer their questions, so like that? But you become enlivened if people have questions. Of course, sometimes people can become afraid if people have questions because they think they might not be able to answer.
Yeah, you never know what they're going to say.
So, purport. The phrase Sutta Uvacha, Sutta Goswami said, appears to indicate a break in the discourse between Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami. While Shukadev Goswami was speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, Sutta Goswami was only one member of a large audience. But Sutta Goswami was speaking to the sages of Naimisharanya, headed by the sage Shaunaka, a descendant of Shukadev Goswami. This, however, does not make any substantial difference in the topics under discussion. That's very strange. I find that purport interestingly awkward. I mean, not like in a negative way, but that you very rarely, I mean, I can't recall like Srila Prabhupada, putting that in a purport, because it's often jumping between different personalities speaking, and you think, you can get like that. So it's interesting. But it's also interesting that he says that Shaunaka is a descendant of Shukadev Goswami.
Yeah.
Because I thought he would have clarified that he was a descendant of Brihaspati, just because it mentions, not Brihaspati, but Brigu, O son of Brigu. So Sutta Goswami is speaking to the son of Brigu. I'm sure it said earlier on when we were reading that that Shaunaka Rishi is the son of Brigu. But it's interesting he mentions a descendant of Shukadev.
Unless it means parampara descendant, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Shiksha, whatever.
But I think the only person who had heard from Shukadev Goswami was Sutta Goswami, because when Shukadev came out of the womb, he just went off on his own, walkabout, and then he appeared for this conversation, and then after that he also did he leave, or is he's still existing? There isn't any comment of his departure exactly. It's interesting thoughts to check out. Okay, carry on.
Text 4. The greatly learned sage Maitreya said, O Vidura, Brahma thus engaged himself in penances for 100 celestial years as advised by the personality of Godhead, and applied himself in devotional service to the Lord. Purport. That Brahma engaged himself for the personality of Godhead Narayan means that he engaged himself in the service of the Lord. That is the highest penance one can perform for any number of years. There is no retirement from such service, which is eternal and ever encouraging.
Okay, any thoughts?
There is no retirement from such service. Like my spiritual master said, you can never leave Krishna consciousness because it's like the mafia. You just know too much. That's what he said.
To you directly or in a lecture?
No, in a group setting.
Meeting.
Not me personally.
Never heard that. But I mean, it is like that. But the point is, it's not necessarily like the mafia. Please, let's not get that incorrect.
No.
It's because you know too much, and that's I know, but well, you can never leave. I mean, devotional service is our inherent nature. That's what we are, who we're made of. That's how we exist and live. In general, we're by nature spirit souls who are eternal servants of Krishna. So you can never leave that. Of course, most people in the world are not engaged directly in devotional service. But you can change services.
Yeah.
You can change positions. You can move through the varnas, or even the ashrams, rather. More the ashrams, not through varnas. You wouldn't move through varnas. You move through the ashrams. But you never give up service.
Yeah, because there's so many different ways to serve. It's not just one, these are the ways and that's it. I mean,
well, the Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam.
No, but I'm saying in terms of the creative outlet of serving, there's so many different ways you can preach and serve.
It's unlimited.
Absolutely.
It's really unlimited.
As Prabhupada used in his time, like you would say the typewriter or the dictaphone. Just basic example, but like, social media or there's so many different things materially you can engage in Krishna's service and serve. Unlimited.
Yeah. It's unlimited the varieties, and it's unlimited the quantity also.
Yeah.
So like that. So in that way we have to pace ourselves. You have to make sure.
It's not a sprint. It's
a marathon. Oh, look who's talking about marathons. The future marathon runner.
Hopefully.
Okay. Text 5, right? Thereafter Brahma saw
kicking off there.
Thereafter Brahma saw that both the lotus on which he was situated and the water on which the lotus were growing were trembling due to a strong, violent wind. So far out, the visualization that can't wait till, we have like our own, good Lord, our own studio where we can do like proper CGI kind of, and you can show Lord Brahma climbing down and looking in the Lord, that'd be great to see it, Purport. The material world is called illusory because it is a place of forgetfulness of the transcendental service of the Lord. Interesting. Thus, one engaged in the Lord's devotional service in the material world may sometimes be very much disturbed by awkward circumstances. There is a declaration of war between the two parties. Interesting. The illusory energy and the devotee. Goodness gracious, ain't it the truth? And sometimes the weak devotees fall victim to the onslaught of the powerful illusory energy. Lord Brahma, however, was sufficiently strong by the causeless mercy of the Lord, and he could not be victimized by the material energy, although it gave him cause for anxiety when it managed to totter the existence of his position. I'm just going to read that last part. Lord Brahma, however, was sufficiently strong by the causeless mercy of the Lord, and he could not be victimized by the material energy, although it gave him cause for anxiety when it managed to totter the existence of his position. So he wasn't going to succumb to the material energy, but it could make him kind of flinch, every now and again, just because it might challenge the existence of his existence, his position, as it says here. Interesting. And like the part about the two parties being at war, the material energy and the devotee, that's really, we hear that Prabhupada says it's, by becoming a devotee, he says it's basically a declaration of war against the material energy. So, very powerful point.
Yeah.
And it is, And the weaker we are spiritually, the more likely we are to become subjected to, it says fall victim, but to become overpowered by the material energy.
Survival of the fittest. Text 6. Long penance and transcendental knowledge of self-realization had matured Brahma in practical knowledge, and thus he drank the wind completely along with the water. Purport. Lord Brahma's struggle for existence is a personal example of the continued fight between the living entities in the material world and the illusory energy called Maya. Beginning from Brahma down to this age, the living entities are struggling with the forces of material nature. By advanced knowledge in science and transcendental realization, one can try to control the material energy which works against our endeavors. And in the modern age, advanced material scientific knowledge and penance have played very wonderful roles in controlling the powers of material energy. Such control of material energy, however, can be most successfully carried out if one is a soul surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and carries out his order in a spirit of loving transcendental service.
Interesting. Thoughts?
Yeah, I was just thinking this, like, in terms of, we were saying, declaring war, or the material energy being something we have to constantly be vigilant and fight against. But the last bit of this purport, that basically you just have to be sheltered or surrendered and under Krishna, and you can do anything. Because there's always this talk, I find, I mean, in my services, that say devotees that live in the temple, they have this fear, when you go outside, when you work, when you do this, like, no, whatever you're experiencing out there, that energy, you got in here, but you're choosing it, or sometimes, to not engaging it. And to be honest with you, you could be outside and be extremely strong and fixed because you're purposefully taking that deliberate shelter. And you can be a bit laxable and a bit like whatnot because you're in the temple, because it's a bit like, well, of course I'm in the temple, I'm in the spiritual world, and accidents do happen on the royal road, as they say. We'll leave it there.
Okay. Yeah, it seems that it's pointing out that we as living entities can try to control the material energy, like scientists, they try to manipulate. Like I just saw in the news this morning that in Dubai, or that it's so hot that they're using drones to create rain.
Yeah.
They're somehow, So that, and you just think, oh, well, how is that affecting other things, People just can't be satisfied, I mean, if you don't want to live in a desert, then move away or something. But whatever it is, science tries to manipulate the material energy, and they may do so in certain ways, that's for sure. But at the same time, the only way to really overcome the influence is Daiviyesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratya, that one has to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's in charge of the material energy. And then one can easily cross beyond it. So
And the thing is, with all these so-called scientific advancements, time does tell how the side effects, are.
Yeah.
Normally, there's so many small red tape and that you can't sue them, or maybe by then you're dead or got some disease. But
there's always a side effect.
Yeah.
There's some repercussion. Okay, this will be our last one. We'll read text 7. Thereafter he saw the lotus on which he was situated was spread throughout the universe, and he contemplated how to create all the planets, which were previously merged in that very same lotus. Purport. The seeds of all the planets in the universe were impregnated in the lotus in which Brahma was situated. All the planets were already generated by the Lord, and all the living entities were also born in Brahma. The material world and the living entities were all already generated in seedling forms by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Brahma was to disseminate the same seedlings all over the universe. The real creation is therefore called Sarga, and later on the manifestation of Brahma is called Visharga. So this is interesting because Sarga and Visharga are two of the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam, or the 10 topics that have to be included in any Vedic text for it to be established and considered a Vedic text, or an authorized Vedic text. So Sarga is the creation, that creation coming from Mahavishnu. Visharga is the secondary creation, which is the creation that we're about to hear about, where Lord Brahma recreates. But it's interesting, this example, because last night we were with my in-laws, with my wife's family, and sister-in-law, she's doing lots of work in the garden, and remember she was pulling out all these little packets of seeds. Now, of course, we often go to the store and pick up the seeds, But she's got flowers that she's growing, and when the flowers fall off, she's taking those flowers and getting the seed straight out of the flowers. And as I was looking at that, I was just thinking, this is so remarkable, you know. Krishna is so amazing that he, you know, you get the plant fructifies from a small seed, and it produces millions more seeds, you know, like, so it can like repopulate, you know, itself like 100 times. So so it's very interesting. And then she had all these little seeds. And when I was reading this, I was just thinking, yeah, it's, you know, with the Lord, when he creates Brahma, in Brahma is the potential for the manifestation of all the planets and all the living entities. They're all born in Brahma. Just like, you know, when you see one flower, you may think it's just one flower, but when that flower dies and it falls to the ground, those seeds will come out and go into the ground, and that's the potential for so many more flowers like that.
Yeah.
Generations
like
of
a
flowers.
miracle.
It is actually, yeah.
You know?
Really far. Okay, so we'll stop there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for your kind attention. Don't forget, if anyone is interested in a set of Srimad Bhagavatams, please do get in touch with us. This morning in class they read the what's it called, Vajra Purnim verse from the 12th canto, which we're almost finished in Bhagavatam class in the morning at So Street. It's only a few more verses left. And yeah, they just read this Vajra Purnim verse, which is about how important it is to give or receive a set of Srimad Bhagavatams on the Vajra Purnima, which happens this year at the end of September. So we've got plenty of sets, so you can make yourself fortunate, make others fortunate by joining in and either sponsoring a set of Bhagavatams, or taking a set for yourself, or taking a set and giving it to some friends. Okay? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prataraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
Bye.